Yeah. All right. Hey, we have a handful of important concepts to cover here. So, however you've been taking notes the last 2 days, you probably want to get that out. If that means that you've been doing nothing and sitting there soaking it in, and you have unbelievable knowledge, then you can do that. But if you're the type of person that needs to write stuff down or use your fancy stylist, I would do that. Throat is getting dry. Excuse me. Yep. Practicing for my IU basketball tryout. Okay. Whew. All right, Zoomers. Welcome. We have a short day. I know that the class period's over at 12:43, so I'm not going to go over. I do need you to be remotely engaged here, so I see very few cameras on. So I guess I'll just have faith in the fact that you're not sitting on your phone watching Netflix or playing your Nintendo Switch the whole time. Okay? Because that would lead to bad habits and a low morale for school. Because we're going to talk about morale. Does anyone know what the word morale means? Morale. Morale. Jensen, do you know what morale means? What do you think it is? You know what it is, but you don't really want to explain it. Put it into words. You want to take a shot at it, Charlie? Ah, good. So morale is the overall state of one's being. It can be positive or it can be negative, correct? Right? So when we're nearing the end of the war, to end all wars, the Great War, do you think the countries that were involved had high morale or low morale? Pretty much generally accepted that they had low morale because they had been fighting in essentially the same place, in the same land, 30 square miles of land, 30 miles back and forth for 4 years. And millions of people died in the same place. So that's why you can imagine the morale was not very good. I don't even understand why this is not liking me right now. But here comes the United States to save everyone, right? So, remember, what was it? Here we go. Yesterday, we were talking, I showed you the poster of the Lusitania. That was a ship. It was an Irish ship that was, it was actually had 128 Americans and about 1,300 people overall on it. And it was torpedoed by a German U-boat, okay, on May 7, 1915. So this is about 9-10 months into the war, okay? Now, what's the issue with this is the Germans had what's called blockaded and or blockaded. They put landmines and they had their U-boats create a blockade so that Britain couldn't import, or they severely limited the British's ability to import supplies from their colonies. Remember, Napoleon tried to do that as well in the continental system. So here's the thing. The United States, the Germans had suspected that the United States was providing aid or selling goods to Britain and France, but they were sending it across the Atlantic Sea in passenger ships in the bottom of them. Because the U.S. is capitalistic. They wanted to make money. U.S. companies want to make money. Also, there's this whole idea of paternalism. Have you guys ever heard of that word? Root word is paternal, which means the idea that the United States and Great Britain had a mother-father-like relationship, all right, to our parent-like relationship to the U.S., all right? So when that happens, that is, you have these people like Gabriel over here that want to say that that's what caused the United States to join World War I. It's not. Okay. NOT, underline. It is a factor or a motive, but it's not the reason. Okay. We continue. In this telegram called the Zimmermann telegram, because that was the German ambassador to the United States. Okay. He wrote in a telegram, a coded message that was a big group of numbers. Okay. The British intercepted it, and it was a telegram in code that was translated to, it was being sent to the Mexican ambassador. Okay. That said that they're going to start unrestricted warfare again, which the Germans had already at this point in 1916 sunk 4 more U.S. passenger ships. Okay, so killing innocent Americans is not typically high up on the United States government's list of cool things to do, okay, or things that are encouraged. The next thing then is this telegram said, not only are we going to continue unrestricted warfare, but it's probably going to upset the United States. So Mexico, please join in the war and attack the United States. And when you attack the United States, you can get back Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, California. You can take all that land that the United States took in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1854. And then on top of that, oh yeah, if you want to invite Japan to play in this little game too, you could go ahead and do that. Of course, remember, Japan is not super happy with the U.S. because we had been acting like their parents ever since the Japanese started to industrialize again in the 1860s on, right? So this kind of makes sense. So the United States, I don't like to talk about politics too much because I find politics to be dry, and especially in the United States, I like to talk about world-related events. But here's the deal. You have a Democrat as a president, Woodrow Wilson. You have a Congress that is dominated by Republicans. The Republicans were very anti-war. And so they actually passed a handful of different bills and measures to make sure the U.S. stayed out of World War I. But because this telegram was sent and it was published in newspapers in the United States, that was kind of like, what do you want to call the straw that broke the camel's back? That was it right there. Does that make sense, Gabe? You see why the U.S. would be upset? The public opinion would change? Yes. And so seeing this as a direct threat, it's almost a unanimous vote in the House, because you guys know this, I think, to declare war, the House of Representatives and the Senate has to vote, right? Okay, it's not unanimous, but it's darn close. And so the U.S. enters the war on April 6th of 1917. Okay? Now, does the U.S. fight right away? Do we all of a sudden have 1 million troops to pour into? No, not at all. Interestingly enough, we end up sending 2 million troops, but they don't get there until the summer of 1918. It takes the U.S. that long. Think about it, that's over a year that it takes the United States to what's called mobilize. Remember, Germany had thought Russia would take 6 months. The United States was so anti-war up to this point that it took the United States 14, 15 months to actually get troops into Europe. Okay. What did the United States do that changed the course of the war, though? What was that first word I used Monday? Morale. When you have, at that point, the by far world's strongest economy that had been untouched by war, a sleeping giant, when you get them to enter on your side, is your morale going to be boosted? Monday. That is a major morale boost. Okay? And again, what I'm saying is, think about the motivation of the troops on the front, on the Western Front. Britain, the British, the French, the Indians, the Canadians, the people from Australia and New Zealand that were fighting. Now all of a sudden they get U.S. clothing, they get U.S. food, they get U.S. guns, U.S. technology products, and that's going to help them, give them an advantage. Okay, now the U.S. does fight. Yeah, we lose, I don't know, 65,000 men or so in the war, but we don't end up showing up, and we didn't fight particularly well. You know what our nickname was? Anyone heard of this before? They called the U.S. soldiers this. I think it's in your book. Doughboys. They called, the Pillsbury Doughboy. You ever seen the Doughboy before? Because they call them that because of their glimmering uniforms that were too clean, and their like pale skin and looked like they had been, sitting on their couch eating Cheetos for the last 4 years and not fighting, which they had been. Okay. And we also had no experience in fighting. We hadn't fought a war since 1899, Spanish-American War. We had some skirmishes in the Philippines where we embarrassed ourselves pretty bad, but we had no experience, no troops with any experience. So the best thing that the United States had to offer was exactly what I said: uniforms, money, food. All right, here's a good cartoon for you. You can see the guy. This is a fake cartoon, right? The Lusitania. Can't you see I'm a blooming Yankee? And then you got the German little submarine going, "Who is the what boat?" In his German accent. And yeah. And then here's a good one. It says the crowning achievement. The latest submarine victim may be the last, May 3rd, 1916. What's happening here? What's being sunk? The U.S. Patience. So the ship would be the U.S. Patience, and it's being sunk. You get it? Ah, yeah. Oh, here's another one. Some promise! Exclamation point. April 1917. We have our Prussian Junker hat, the horn, okay, with our very racist depiction of a Mexican with a sombrero. And it says, join with Germany, you can get a bit of the United States. So this is propaganda in favor of the U.S. doing what? Going to war with Germany, right? Get the U.S. to join the war. Ooh, we have somebody in the chat wants to say something, so we should probably see what that is. I'm just paying attention to time. That's my birthday. Well, that's fascinating, Charlotte. I'm really glad that you put that in the chat and wasted a minute of our lives. Anyways, don't forget a birthday. Okay, so at the same time that this happens, that was I don't know. I'm videotaping this, so I'm not gonna say anything else. All right. The Spanish flu breaks out. Okay. The Spanish flu makes COVID look small. Okay. Remember the map I showed you yesterday of all of the troop movements? You guys with me? Yeah. So this flu that's called the Spanish flu because they think it originated in Spain got to the trenches towards the end of the war. When it got to the trenches, the problem was there were soldiers from all over the world in the Western Front. And so they went home after the war. They took this virus with them. And the lack of knowledge of a virus, which astoundingly hit us in 2021, 102 years earlier hits, and there's no remedies. There's no knowledge of what to do. So what's the only thing that people can do? I was looking this up. I'm not going to show you this video. You can look at it at home if you want. It's like a minute and a half. It's kind of interesting, but we don't have time. What do? Socially distance and stay away from each other. Can you do that in a trench? No. Can you do it in a small boat when you're packing like a sardine going home? No. Can you do it when you're living in a slum house in a city in the United States? No. So the Spanish flu kills 30 million people. Some will say 50 million. The numbers aren't accurate, okay? But around 550,000 in the United States. Where are we at with Corona in the United States? We're at about 200,000 plus. Are we up to that level? Okay. Okay. Well, you can. I can't do the Google because I got all these things running, but you can probably do a quick Google for me and let me know. Yeah, not cases. I think we're over 2 million cases. But look at China and India, places that have population levels far greater than that of the United States. A third of the world got this flu. Yeah. We have 42,000. 225,000. In the United States? Jeez. again, that's our freedom at it right there. All right. So places that were more heavily populated, obviously, and less infrastructure, India and China had it worse. Okay, but the fact that the outbreak occurs right after this deadly, costly war is I mean, just adds to the chaos of this whole situation. All right, so the end of the war is complicated. Okay, and so there's some things I'm going to explain here that I'm going to need you to like, right, if you're not into the writing of anything, at least make sure you understand these words. So first off, what happens is, if you remember right, Lenin, Vladimir Ulyanov, or also known as Lenin, he was paid by the Germans to leave Vienna and escape across the Russian border because he had been kicked out of Russia because he was a political dissident. Okay. And so when he gets kicked out of Russia, the Germans sneak him back in through Siberia with gold and tell him to start this communist or Bolshevik. Bolshevik just means like minority party in Russia and get Russia out of the war. It works. Okay. Russia has a revolution. The Tsar is put under house arrest. We'll talk about this next week. But what that means is now now that Russia has withdrawn from the war, what does Germany get? To only fight on one front. So the two-front disaster that Germany had to fight, which caused it to not be able to win, now should look like, for Germany, now this should look like a cupcake war. They should be able to win. All the troops that are fighting in Austria-Hungary on the Russian in the Eastern Front can now move over to the Western Front, and they can focus on that. So you have, basically, look at it this way. You've got the U.S. joining on the side of the Britain and France. You have Russia withdrawing, so Germany only has one front. So that's going to kind of come to a head, right? And each side basically tries multiple different offenses in 1918, and they don't move at all. They don't go anywhere. Russia loses a third of its land. And it's not the worthless land that's in Siberia or Mongolia, okay? Russia loses a third of its land in this treaty to Germany. And it's their European land. It's the land they had fought since the withdrawal of the Mongols to try to take and become. Remember, Russia was always looking for a window to the West, right? They always wanted to be looked at as somewhat European. They wanted to eliminate their Asian past, Mongolian past. They lose that. Germany takes it. So, again, thinking about it that way, you can never know what's really going to happen. Well, it's a war of attrition. If we go back to using that A word, attrition. So it's kind of like the last person left standing is going to be the victor. And that's what is. You guys have ever heard the term MAD before? MAD? What does it stand for? It's an acronym. MAD stands for mutually assured destruction. Okay, so once atomic bombs were made enough to blow up the whole world, there's the understanding that if one atomic bomb is ever dropped again, the whole world will disappear. Because retribution will be that other places will drop atomic bombs and then we'll all cease to exist. MAD, mutually assured destruction. So were they going to let everybody kill themselves to the point where they no longer existed? No. And so the German government and the German Kaiser in German stands for what? King. Exactly. So the German king, Wilhelm II, if you jot that down, remember, he abdicates the throne. What does it mean to abdicate? God, I can't said it last period. They thought I was saying advocate. I'm saying abdicate. I had to put it in the chat box. I'm going to do it here for you those on Zoom that are getting confused because my mask is disgusting. I'm going to abdicate. Abdication. That is the process of abdicating. What does that mean? Rowan. When you what? Give it up. It means to void something, I think. Eliana, correct. So what that means is the Kaiser, okay, who is literally Frederick the Great, Frederick the Wise, Otto von Bismarck's and his dad were the ones who created the German dynasty, turned Prussia into Germany through this mastermind of wars, doctored up the Berlin Conference and took over parts of China. He was his son. He sucked. Sorry, bad word. He was not good. Last class, I had to use the analogy of a craps table. The dad, to Germans, was like a guy who rolled 12s all day long. Okay, when you roll 12s on a craps table, you win a lot of money. The son was like rolling a 7 and out every time. And then again, I don't want to encourage gambling, but you roll 7 in craps, you lose, you're out. Dice, you're gonna play dice. Okay, bad. He was bad, and so he was weak. And so when he left and abdicated, the Germans were left with basically no government. And so the liberal government, which was not voted in, basically took over because the Kaiser had taken, during war powers, Kaiser Wilhelm had taken almost all control. I mean, leaders tend to do that when there's a war going on. Look what our government has done, with a Republican governor who typically doesn't do anything. Look what he's done with mask regulations and gatherings, all that stuff. Some Republicans are pissed. You can read the newspaper today. They're trying to stop him from doing it again. What I'm saying is leaders get more power when there's a pandemic or a war going on. So this guy had been acting like an autocratic dictator, and he just leaves. The people that take over for him, they decide that this war is done. There's no reason to fight. And so they agree to what's called an armistice. You need to make sure you write that word down, armistice, okay? What is an armistice? Anybody know? Anyone on the Zoom know? What is an armistice? Take a stab at it? No? Yeah, Rowan. It's a ceasefire. It's a truce. Exactly. Okay? It's an agreement to stop fighting. If we want to make it the most simple definition we can. An agreement to stop fighting. What is it not? What is it not? Anybody accepting what, Rowan? You're smart. There's no defeat. There is no defeat in an armistice. This is what always gets me about world history. I get worked up about this stuff. Okay? It's like if I played only in a tennis match and it got dark outside and we had to stop the tennis match. He can't claim he beat me if the score is not done, if we're not done with our set. If he did, I would talk behind his back, And then again, that's why we get World War II. That's why we get Adolf Hitler. That's why we get the anti-Semitism, one of the reasons. Okay. All right. I'm not going to get any more worked up. That's enough today. So this agreement to stop fighting is at 11 a.m. In the 11th month, on the 11th day, 1918. Okay. What do we call that day today? We celebrate it every year. Someone got it. Kenna. It's called Veterans Day to this day. Okay. Now, think about it this way. The Germans returned home from the trenches thinking, well, 1, alive. Okay. 2, their country didn't look like France, which was in shambles. 3, they thought they had fought pretty darn well. 4, the people at home thought they lost and told them they lost when they got home. How do you think they're going to feel? Liza, how do you think they're going to feel? Huh? bad, mad, sad, but definitely not glad. Okay? And I hate to use rhyming words, but come on, folks. I hang out with 18-month-olds when I leave here. You got to use 3 4-letter words consistently that don't start with F. So there you go. That was bad. All right. So, jeez. Gabriel, you might have a photographic memory, but all right. So, these German soldiers return home, and if you look, they don't think they're lost. So that's what we're gonna have to get into tomorrow. But I want you to see these graphs real quick. On the upper right-hand corner are the Entente or the Allied powers' deaths. Look how significant Russia is here. Okay, 30% of the Entente deaths are Russians, 9 million people plus, and they fought 1 year less in the war. Okay, this year, because of the amount of time we get to spend on this and the crazy Zoom thing, I don't really get to explain how bad Russia fought. Okay, no joke. Russia had such limited resources and such bad leadership that oftentimes they would be fighting like 2 or 3 people for one weapon. Their soldiers at times were shoeless, bootless in the middle of a Russian winter. Okay, that's why so many people died, and that's one of the reasons why the revolution will happen. I mean, it's a joke. You know, what they would have to do was and again, the British and French and Germans did a little bit of this too, but for Russia, it was even worse. The generals would stand behind the trenches and shoot anybody that tried to leave. Because if you had any common sense, you would try to get the heck out of there and go escape anywhere you can other than be stuck on the front line in a Russian uniform. Yes, sir. Rowan. Yeah. What's a penal battalion? I mean, what do you explain it a little bit? Well, it's usually when they force their prisoners to fight for them. They made everything that they had. I mean, that's what I'm saying. That's why they had their generals were so bad that they'd waste bullets on shooting their own people versus not giving the guns to the front line. Yeah, a lot of weird stuff. But again, unfortunately, we can't get into it too much. So if you look at these central powers on the bottom right, you'll notice Germany did suffer quite a few deaths, and so did Austria-Hungary. Okay, this next map will show it to you. Pretty clean here. Austria, Germany, you can see devastated. France devastated. I mean, Britain, 3 million. But again, that Russian number really sticks out as being the obvious one. Okay, the U.S., you see where we fall on here. And my great grandfather fought in World War I. But again, we only fought for 3 or 4 months at most. But the reason why the death toll was so high was, 1, we had no experience in this type of warfare, and 2, this was when the Germans were trying to launch offensives that at the end failed. And so we created even more of a stalemate. Yes, sir. Does not include flu deaths. So that, like I said, just added to the absolute chaos that's going to ensue, which we're going to get into tomorrow. Okay. All right. I know this class has about 3 minutes until 4 minutes, maybe, until this bell thing rings. So everybody stay on here. I want to share a couple things with you here. Tony, hey, this is interesting, folks in the class. Look at this. Tony says, both my great-grandpas fought in World War I, but on different sides. LOL. I don't know. That's interesting. All right. Going to change the screen share here. I want everybody to look up here, please. That's in class. And please, if you can, check this out, because I want to make sure you're aware of what's going on. So I'm going to go to modules like I normally do. And when I go to modules, my computer's going really slow. I got to get rid of these Zoom videos that are on here. Come on, modules. Okay. When you go down here to 127 to 129, complete soapstones. Click on that. So yesterday, yesterday you should have done the ultimatum to Serbia, 21 demands from Russia. I heard through the grapevine that this poster website might have been acting up a little bit if you try to do that, but it works fine for me. If you can't figure this one out on your own, then just Google World War I propaganda posters and pick one out. The whole meaning is for you to understand that the government used propaganda to get people to commit to putting more effort towards the war, okay? Sacrificing. Now, the one that you would do for today, okay, if you want to stay on pace, this is the Zimmerman telegram, okay? This is the actual, you'll see, this comes from the National Archives. Read the first page and then read the second page. The second page is where, this is the one I usually print for students. We intend to begin submarine warfare. We're going to try to keep the United States neutral. Mexico get in on it, and then you can invite Japan if you want to. Okay, so take a look at that primary source. Super interesting. Look at the dates on it. I can say I have it saved on my computer. I usually will hand that out in class. Okay, 5 and 6. Don't do those yet. I don't know why I have 2 people that submitted things. Don't do them yet because we haven't talked about them yet. Wait till we talk about them in context. I'm going to make this due Sunday night, okay, so that we can actually talk about the League of Nations, and then we can talk about Article 231, which is called the War Guilt Clause. You will understand tomorrow, and then you'll be able to put it in context of World War I and the rest of the world, okay? Don't waste your time doing it now. It won't be a valuable experience. The other thing is I'm down to 3 essays left in period 7-8. Once those are done, I'm starting on yours. So if you get a comment back on your essay, everyone's going to get a rubric back. Even if you got a 7 out of 7, you're going to get a rubric. It's a Google Doc that's shared. Click on it or put the link in. Look at it. If you don't get a 7 out of 7, you need to rewrite it and submit it again. And you're going to submit it again and again until it's a 7 out of 7. And I need the peer edit sheet. That's why it's out of 80 and not 70. Now, you will have until the end of the 9 weeks to get that done. Okay? And so basically, if that is not finished, it'll go in as 0 out of 80 in the grade book, but you're going to have plenty of time to regrade it. If you want to set up a Zoom meeting to talk about your essay with me once you do get it back, I'm cool with that. Mr. Renshaw is rocking out in the CP, so I might be able to do a little bit of Zooming, periods 1, 2, 3 type thing, okay? Or after school. All right, folks on Zoom, thanks for your participation today. Have a great rest of your day.